Welcome to the Resume Storyteller, bringing you interviews with industry experts, regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Hey guys, I have with me executive resume writer and job search consultant, Reckamp. She is a writer and content strategist for Chicago-based career services firm, Job Search Like a Pro. But earlier roles include head senior writer for a global outplacement and career transitioning firm, Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. She was also a professional training and coaching. She also worked for a professional training and coaching firm, Empowered Possibilities, as well as EQ, IQ coaching. She is a fellow member of the National Resume Writers Association and also Career Thought Leaders. And I feel like you and I have become friends, so I've been very, very excited to speak with you. We got to know each other on the LinkedIn platform, and it sort of turned into a relationship after that, which is, a testament to the power of LinkedIn.
And your own friendliness, I have to say.
Thank you. Same right back at you. Oh, so Erica, you heard my quick bio, but I'd love if you could share a little bit about what made you go out on your own and, how your background lent itself to doing what you do today.
Sure. I always love hearing people's backstories.
Yeah.
So that always you can tell a lot about where they're coming from. So I actually started in university. I was studying Nigerian praise poetry, which is kind of a funny thing to fall in love with, but absolutely.
Nigerian praise poetry?
Yes.
I did not know that was a thing. Oh my goodness. Okay, I have to look it up.
Yeah. So it's basically, like these poets, and they stand on a street corner and they'll say, come up with these poems impromptu, wonderful things to build up the community, right? So this teacher's walking through the market. She leads our children to a brighter future, and then hoping that, people will drop a little money in the bucket, so to speak. Or, our culture is the strongest culture. We need to preserve our culture, remember our stories, and they'll talk about historical chiefs and things like that. And I just thought it was so beautiful, and just the emphasis on social responsibility, building people up to be better, do better. And I just fell in love. So I did that for a few years, loved it. But then it really felt like, as a white girl from the suburbs, how much of a voice should I really have in that field? So I did some ghostwriting, but then ultimately decided, I kind of need to find something that, maybe makes money.
Right.
And is maybe a little more appropriate, right? So I just answered a blind ad, which, I don't know how much I would advise other people to do that, but it happened to work out. And it was the executive outplacement firm, Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. Come to realize, writing this content, it's basically like the capitalist version of Nigerian praise poetry, because these people who have been displaced, they really need somebody to bring out that confidence, highlight their proudest professional moments so that they are well equipped to get out there and start, contributing to society, making things better again, which they definitely are well equipped to do.
You're right.
So
it's the white collar version of that.
Exactly. And how could I have known that? I never would have even known to look for that. So I just fell in love with the whole process, then shifted to partnering with coaches, finding more about how they wanted it to manifest with their practice, whether it was emotional quotient or empowerment. And everybody's kind of got their own flavor. And then going to the resume development firms. So it's really interesting, all those different approaches. You can really see once you start looking at somebody's content, where they're coming from. Like you can sometimes even tell, like, this person has an HR background. I can tell. Or this person has a recruiting background.
Yeah, that's so true.
Because there are different concerns for every, pain point in the hiring process. And so I loved kind of my impetus behind going off on my own was bringing all these things together and trying to find something that spoke to every stage in the hiring process, really leveraging the research from each of these, segments of the industry to come up with something that really serves the job seeker well and helps cut their job search time.
So do you support people across the full journey? Like, do you help with I know you write their you work with them to write their documents, but do you also provide coaching?
That's a good question. So there's so many different types of coaching, and I know myself and I know my limits. I am not good with career pathing or like somebody who needs to process their emotional, that can be a really huge blow to the ego, to even your basic functionality. Right. That's not me. I'm not the person you want to talk to for things like that. There are wonderful people who deal with that. I can refer you out. I would deal with the actual content strategy, the job search strategy. So I can give you like insights into how to approach the interview scenario, or what to happen if you're stalled at one stage of the job search process. So it's really a job search, consultant.
So when someone is clear on what they want to do next and they sort of have figured that out, that's where you come in.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if somebody comes to me and they're like, I just need a resume. What do you want to do? I don't know. You're not ready to talk to me.
Right. Okay. Good. That is good to know. That's what I'm in the same place as you, but there are wonderful people to help people figure out the next best steps. But I'm sure that you see a variety of different job seekers. Would you say that by and large, the people that you come across with, do you see sort of commonality in terms of a few major challenges that they are facing, whether they are making a career pivot or whether they are getting ready to launch a job search?
Sure. I think something I'm hearing a lot of right now is just that there's so much information out there.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And they're just kind of inundated and overwhelmed with the advice. And it can be very contradictory, especially when LinkedIn is such a valuable resource. I love LinkedIn, but it's generic. It's speaking to, a crowd. It's not speaking to an individual customized concern. So it can feel like you're being trivialized, or it can feel like nobody's talking about what you're worried about specifically. Or it can be misinterpreted, right? If you tell one person you have to start with a summary and then you have to go straight into the experience. Well, if somebody's in the tech sector, you might want to have a tech skills section up pretty high. So some things like that, you really can't be too generic about. And so they get a little confused, inundated, overwhelmed. The other thing I see is just that the market is so incredibly volatile. It's really difficult to predict. We're still seeing shifting requirements. Am I going to be able to work remotely, or are they going to kind of double down? Like even Google pulled back and they're like, okay, maybe not. We'll wait till 2022. And then what's happening? Like these people retired early thinking they were facing, a pandemic. Now they're like, well, maybe we want to come back. And they're still not sure what to do with that. Even the dream job scenario, we saw a lot of people, millennials especially, leaving to pursue a dream role instead of being locked into the overworking that they were stuck with during the pandemic. And then how long is that going to last? Is that going to take root, or is that going to be something that kind of they decide to return to corporate because it failed to launch, right? And then are we going to see them re-entering late fall or next spring? So all these things, we're still kind of not sure, like who has the advantage. We're hearing all these jobs are open, but they're not the types of jobs people are interested in. So it's still really competitive market and hard to predict.
And I'm seeing that too, where people are like, oh, the world is my oyster. I can explore remote jobs. I can explore new career paths. Or can I? Because our company's going to do this, or are they going to do that? Just a lot of moving parts going on. And I feel like decisions are being made at the corporate level at the very last minute because they're still navigating things. I've been keeping tabs on the job search market for, 20 plus years. I've never seen it in greater flux than now.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah. And even something you think you're applying for an open position, they'll be like, actually, we decided not to hire. Like, what?
Yeah. Pause. Yeah, exactly. And that always happened, but it's definitely
more.
Yeah, it's on steroids right now. I agree. And competitive, I feel for job seekers that when opportunity is great, competition is even higher because everyone is in there testing the waters.
Right. Yeah. And It's helpful if they don't. You know, some people are like, take the leap, do a career leap. It's like,
I like dip your toes, go slowly.
Right,
but everyone's
right.
personality is different. Exactly.
Well, and you got to lay the foundation. You don't want to leap and there's nothing there.
Right. No, that's a really good point. What is there something that you are finding that people are just utterly surprised by when they do initiate a job search that just has caught them off guard?
I think when they talk to me, you know, when I'm having the calls with prospective clients, they're surprised by how much we can influence reader reception and retention, whether it's with ambitious content strategies or whether it's with the power of storytelling. Like something that they thought was a major obstacle can become more of a blip or a non-issue. And it's not to say that we need to ignore it, like especially if you are targeting larger organizations or, you know, that would be more subject to some of the legal requirements in terms of meeting all the qualifications. But, you know, for example, not having a degree, people are really surprised. Like if you target this type of organization, if we frame your experience in this way, it's really not going to be as much of a roadblock as you're anticipating that it's going to be. So I think that is a pleasant surprise, right? Other than that, it's still just that volatility of the market. Like they are really hoping, you know, everybody has that cheat sheet and it's gonna magically make this job manifest. And it doesn't work like that. It takes a lot of, you know, laying that groundwork, putting in the effort through networking, making sure your content speaks to what you want to do and aligning that with the organization's needs. So
I love that pleasant surprise. You're right. There is the power of the written language and the spoken language is strong, and you can control the narrative or at least drive it a little bit.
absolutely.
No, I love that. I love that. So what advice would you give someone who is beginning to explore the idea of leaving their role? Like, how would you recommend they get started?
That's a good question. So I think the first step, which we kind of touched on earlier, is to really get clear on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because without that clarity, I mean, you really can't expect somebody else to uncover something for you. You have to at least
won't figure it out. You're right. They're not going to connect the dots at all.
Yeah, it's not their homework.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, you want to smooth your own path by figuring out what that is. Once you've figured that out, if you need to, if you don't have the alignment with the role quite yet, that's when you can look into, you know, building out your training, maybe joining a couple of organizations, transitioning some of your contacts to more align with that field, even asking your current contacts, do you know somebody in this field? And then updating. If you have any social proof, if you have recommendations for your current role, updating them. So whether you're changing or not, you want it to be current, right? You don't want your recommendation to be from 12 years ago.
And
so you want them to be able
to your target. Yeah.
Yeah. So whether, even if you decide you're staying in the same lane, you still want to update it. You still want to be talking about current initiatives, right? Because it changes. And they don't want it to seem like, oh, well, this person had contacts 20 years ago and now their network's dried up and they have zero influence in the industry, right? So, and then also it can help if your company seems, you know, friendly and they communicate well. Sometimes you can even tell them that you're planning to grow in some way. And that doesn't mean like, hey, heads up, I'm going to be leaving soon. That's more like, I'm looking for more leadership opportunities, or I'm looking to transition from an individual contributor role to more of a sales type role. And I'd like to be able to come on sales calls. Giving them some sense of that can help them feel like, oh, great, well, we've invested in them. You might actually stick around a little longer, mutual benefit. And it helps you set you up so that when you're ready to make the change, you have a stronger footing.
You know, I interviewed Nicole Shearsky. Do you know her?
I'm not sure.
She's a coach for STEM, women in STEM.
Okay.
And she is a huge champion of what you just said. if you are looking to make a pivot or to take things, or to maybe jump to the next level, be upfront with, start with your company, because some of the bigger obstacles to making a career change are that you don't have experience doing it, and it's a much easier. Sorry, you can
it's
overcome
a much softer sell.
Exactly, it's a much softer sell. People already know you; they already trust you. You're not charging them. You're trying to give away you're trying to get experience in exchange for, and for them, it's a win-win. I'm not speaking very clearly today.
Absolutely. No, they get the best out of you. The new converts, so to speak, are the most zealous, right? The people who are so excited to be trying something new, they get all of that positive energy from you. Also, if they've just given you kind of like done you a favor, like by saying, okay, well, we really need you to still do, tech analysis, you can go on sales calls once a week.
That's right.
They've still thrown you a bone.
If you're willing to do in the extra hours, you can get the experience, but you don't have to overcome meeting new people and convincing them that you're worth taking a risk on doing this. Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I think that's great. Unless you're miserable in your company, then that's a whole nother story. But
right.
Try. It's a great way to get some experience to help overcome that roadblock.
Absolutely, yeah. And then updating your content to make sure it speaks to that target, building out that network, interview prep, doing that before you hit the market is really helpful, because a lot of times people will kind of be wading through and not really, they're just muddying the waters.
Yeah. No. So what about the person who doesn't come to you? And I'm sure, I know I get a lot of these, who has been job hunting. They didn't do the planning and the alignment and the preparation beforehand. So they have been job searching. It is not going well. How do you recommend they sort of regroup?
That's a good question. And a lot of times it's not where they think it is, right? They have whatever their scapegoat is, whether it's the interview or the resume. And a lot of times it's not that. It's not what they think. They think. I think really kind of writing down your whole process, right? Like, what are you doing? Are you going to job boards? Are you leaning into your network? Do you have a strong network? Are you letting leads fall once you have them, right? Like, are you following up? Are you maintaining the relationship, even if you don't get an offer? Is your content generating any interest? Do you have that clear target? Sometimes people think they do, and then they kind of dig deeper and they're like, actually, I look like I'm pursuing 3 different jobs. If you've had no offers or if you've had really low offers, both those things say different things about your content, your process. Looking at that, figuring out where the gap is in that process can help you pinpoint like, oh, my problem's actually in interview prep, or, oh, my problem's actually at the negotiation stage. That's where it's falling apart. So just kind of having that written down in a concrete kind of flow, you can more accurately kind of diagnose where that would be if you don't have the resources to talk to a coach and have them diagnose it for you. And then there's the next step, which is having the realism to ask yourself, will you actually change? So sometimes they say, you really need to network more. And they're like, okay, yeah. And then they go home and they're like, I'm not going to do it.
You're like, I'm never going to do that. Right.
I hate this. So, and then at that point, if you're self-actualized enough, you need to come up with some workarounds. And that might be that you're going to take a long route. It might take a little bit longer. It's your own scenic route, so to speak. But you need to figure out what you're going to actually do, what works for you, and then ride that through, right? If you're more comfortable networking on LinkedIn and you're more of a passive search kind of person, that's great. You need to know that. If you're really ambitious, you're willing to, show up on site when you know somebody's going to be there, network on person, your searches are going to look very different. So part of it also is just knowing yourself.
I actually worked with a friend's husband, which, you're always like, you don't want to say no, but you take those on. And, I gave him all the advice in the world, but he's like, he wasn't, I tried to coach him on targeting companies, targeting people, outreach, and he wasn't having any of it.
No.
And so I remember having a very frank discussion with him, and he's like, look, I am going to take your documents and I'm just going to apply online. And he did land. It took a lot longer than I think it would have, but that was his choice. That's where he was comfortable. And who knows, maybe he would have been terrible at the networking and the outreach. He would have done such a poor job that it wouldn't have served him well either.
It would have burned him.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Or some people are currently employed. And so they can't do certain things.
Right. Or
like
they're really in no rush. So you're right. You do need to know yourself. And I think having that self-awareness does lend itself to your earlier response, which is sort of evaluating where you are in the pipeline. Have you had interviews? Have you progressed past the first round? Have you had offers? And your answers to those questions can help you figure out what's not working.
And how, and what's working, what's gaining traction.
And what's not working. Yeah. But you're right. I get people all the time saying it's my resume. And then I find out they've been to, 6 phone screens and they don't get past that first round. It's not your resume. So.
Right. It's something with your story or how you're presenting yourself, or you're giving away something that you shouldn't be. Right.
Right. So what about those people that have they're really good at lots of different things. That could be an advantage for many, but I find
it's a good problem.
It's a good problem to have, but it is a challenge in terms of controlling that narrative and how you write your documents and how you position the person. What are your thoughts on guiding people that can do a bunch of different things and could go in a lot of different directions?
That's a really good question. And this also really depends where you are in your career and what your targets are. I will say if somebody is, borderline C-suite or pretty high in the exec track or trying to break into the executive track, if they have strong networking skills, it can actually help to lean into that cross-functional expertise, because a lot of organizations are actually looking for people who have proven ability to deliver results, really understand how it interconnects from one function to the next. And that's just a really big picture skill that you need to have at C-level. If you don't have the strong network, then it could work against you because you're going to be leaning more heavily on the content to generate leads. If you have a clear preference between, these multiple skill sets, obviously you would pick that. If they overlap, then maybe it's okay to include some of the things that overlap. So for example, sales, business development, key accounts, those are very, related. Fleet management, transportation, distribution, those things, very related. You could break those down. Yeah. And apply for positions, even if it was, director of fleet management or, distribution director, whatever, you could apply for both of those roles with the same content. You could make that work. The other thing is
a really important distinction. Yeah.
If they're completely divergent. So I had one client who she had her master's in library sciences, really sharp girl. She was also pursuing certifications in like software development and programming. Okay. And because of her network, because of her location, she decided to pursue the programming. And that was very wise.
So you advise them to pick if things are completely divergent.
But what she did that was so smart was she asked her inner circle for leads first and followed the most likely track.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So that's something that you want to consider. Like if you truly like both, you truly could do either. You're just an enthusiast and you're just, some people are just really sharp and pick things up. Yeah. If that's the case, tap in, ask first, do a little recon so that go where you're going to gain the most traction.
I love that. And you're right. I was thinking back at your first point, in certain C-suite roles or on that, when they're well on that executive track, like a general manager, by their very nature and the name of that title, they have finance, operations, and sales experience. They're expected to be able to do that. Most operations people do need to have some financial skills. Right. Chief revenue officers still need to understand a little bit of operations. So, I think there's an opportunity to lean in to that in conversations, but also a little bit in the documents. So,
and that really, like I said, it really depends on how heavily you're going to lean on the content to be generating the leads. If you're focusing really heavily on that, then you do want to be careful about the keywords really pointing in one direction. And then maybe saying, well, yes, of course I have operations experience if I'm a general manager. Of course I have, No,
I think that's really wise. What about, this is something that it's always been an issue, but I feel like it has been, it's gotten its proper, it's becoming it's become more high profile and well deserved. There's a lot of talk about discrimination when it comes to hiring practices, and that spans all the isms: ageism, racism, gender, all of it. What are your thoughts on how, so actually, let me rephrase it. How are you helping clients to navigate this?
Sure. So I feel like there are two camps for these issues. There are the idealists and there are the realists. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, it's real and it's very slippery. So the idealists might be like employee advocates or people with a people and culture background, where they're really wanting to see the best and assuming the best out of people, which is great as a default mode. When you're job searching, I think it's really important to dig into the research, operate within the parameters that exist, be mindful that they are looking at certain characteristics in work history and screening people out. Be mindful that, whether we like it or not, we are going to be subjected to certain preconceived notions based on how we look, how we present ourselves, right? And it's kind of the difference between bring my whole self to work and bringing my best self to work, right? You do want to exude that you don't come with baggage, that you're not bringing problems. And how do you do that in your content? And how do you do that in the ways that you present yourself? And so my approach is to tell people flat out, this is the ugly news. These are the things that somebody could, not necessarily will, but could come to a conclusion by seeing, maybe somebody has 6 to 9 month tenures, right? Whether we like it or not, some people will not consider that candidate. How can we address that issue in the content, right?
You identify and communicate the yellow flags.
And then that's up to them. If they want to adopt, give them a couple different choices, ways to handle it. And then it's up to them what they're comfortable with. Some people are fine with, really aggressive content strategies like, okay, let's combine these positions. Let's do this under a subheading of, distribution roles and then just list them there without dates. Some people are like, what? If I get into a room and somebody says, don't say purple elephant, that's the first thing I'm going to say. Right. And we need to handle it differently. But pretending like it doesn't exist or saying it's the responsibility of the job seeker to push back, like saying, let's normalize whatever. Or, dear job seeker, you just be you. Things like that. It's like,
don't
oh
put
my
up
gosh,
with that. Yeah.
They're going through so much already. They're vulnerable. They're downtrodden. They're fighting tooth and nail to get what they deserve. That's not
everyone's
their
choice whether they want to take on that advocacy role or not.
Right. And are they in a position to do that? Like if if you're a software developer, sure. You're getting called every month anyway.
But there's a lot of age discrimination in the software development crowd. I've been hearing more and more about it.
That's true. That's true. That's also true. Yeah. So, and then there's a fine line between you want to address it and then you also want to flip it to be an asset, right? So both of those things can happen. It's not either or. Yeah. Because they're still going to meet you in person.
That's right. At some point, right. You can't, on paper, it's easy to do to mitigate the yellow flags, but you do need a strategy if you want it, or then you again determine, I'm not going to target these companies because I don't want to deal with that.
Right. Absolutely.
No, thank you for that. What about, let's say that someone comes to you, and I remember getting this all the time when my kids had sports where they would go, oh, this is what you do for a living. So I'm going to start job hunting. What do I need? What are 2 tools that you can say, this is what you need to embark on your job search? What would you name those as?
Sure. Okay. So number 1, and it seems weird that I would even say this, but a resume.
Yeah. Picture the car, yeah.
actually a point of contention at this point, with people wanting to just do the TikTok video or do the video resume or just
You're
lean on
talking
LinkedIn.
print
and
a
be
resume
like,
that can be read on a mobile device.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's still the number one piece of content that people use when considering candidates. So yes, you do want to spend some time and attention on the resume, whether you do it yourself or you hire somebody. That still is the primary piece, right? People can execute a job search without LinkedIn. People can, make it work without even a network. They can do it. Is it going to be as seamless? No. And it's going to be a lot slower, but you can do it. So I still think the resume is the first step. The second one I actually think is a progress or content tracker. Because without that, I think it's really hard to keep momentum, and positive momentum is so important in a job search. And then it also helps you decide when is it appropriate to follow up. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it had already been 2 months since I reached out to that person. And you don't, it's, that usually there's a lot of things going on in a job search. So unless you have that concrete, outline telling you this is the date you last spoke to them, maybe it's time to message or email, make sure that they're still aware that you're interested in the position. You need to do that. And then, honorable mention is still LinkedIn. It's like 100 tools in one. And not taking advantage of it is kind of, right. Yeah. I mean, it's even if you do not use the cutting edge content strategies, you can still use it as a research tool for contacts and companies. So, go ahead, figure out that platform. There's so much to do there.
No, those are all good calls. The progress or the content tracker, it's amazing how fast you can lose track of names, dates, companies, and without a document to be able to put your finger on it instantly.
Or the things that you've learned in the pre-screening call, like that weren't in the job description.
Point, yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, oh, there was something. Yeah. So even jotting notes down in the margins, making sure you print those job descriptions if they take them down before you get a chance to talk to somebody. Yeah. Having all of that at your fingertips really helps keep you on track.
Yeah, because it starts to blur together. And in terms of the momentum in job search has lots of ups and downs. And for me, that content tracker can help you to celebrate the little wins.
Yes.
You feel like you haven't got anything done. And you're like, well, actually, I met 2 people for coffee and they gave me these 2 names. And that's a win.
That's huge. And I've exhausted these leads, right? I checked these out. I decided this wasn't a good fit. That's still valuable.
No, really good point. Really good point. So this is one of my favorite questions. Is there something that drives you crazy, crazy nuts when it comes to mishaps? Job seeker, client.
So we kind of touched on this earlier, but the thing that drives me nuts is when they come to you with like a stalled search, like 2 years they've been struggling or they've burned all their leads and you're like, oh, and they'll always say, I wish I'd talked to you sooner. And you're like, me too. So that's just frustrating because they're serious about it. Maybe even they already invested in resume development or went through outplacement, but it still wasn't the right fit. Or they are, talking to their neighbor or so it's really tricky. Finding the right resource, but you just want to consider, you wouldn't go ask somebody on the street, like, is this a cavity? Or,
right.
Get the really generic, a lot of the newbies are posting really generic things that we're like, well, yes, you should network. I mean, and that's the equivalent of, somebody telling you, well, yeah, you should floss. Okay. Well, yes, you should. Sure.
How?
But yeah. And what else do I need to do? Let's go a little deeper. If this is a cavity, we need a little more.
Right. That's funny. What drives me crazy is when they come to me and they have a resume and they never used it. Like there's nothing more annoying to me than having a great set of documents and then they do nothing with it. They made that huge investment and they just sit on it. But
yes, not using the resources or they'll edit it. They'll be like, no, I know I paid like really good money for this, but but Joni over at the Pick and Save said,
yeah, right.
And you changed it? What?
Yeah. Or I read online that this. So, Erica, you have a lot going on. I know you have a large family. You are running a thriving business. What's next for you for the rest of 2021? What are you excited about?
Sure. I appreciate that. I've got a number of presentations. I try to do a smattering, just as a social services mission to get some best practices out there to as many people as possible who maybe can't afford, high-end services.
Are those in person?
There are some in person, and then there will be some remote. Yeah. Okay. So I try to post those on LinkedIn or on my profile page because LinkedIn doesn't like those announcements. Yeah. But those are coming up. Always watch for those. I try to work those in occasionally. And then I'm working on, speaking of more cost-effective options, I'm working on some digital products. They're in beta stages of testing. They're getting looked at by some graphic designers. So I'm really excited about that. Never done anything like it, but I think it can really help a lot of people.
Oh, that is exciting. So if people want to keep up with you, learn about your events, find out about these projects, I have included in your bio links to jobsearchlikeapro.com and then also to your LinkedIn profile. Are those the two best places for people to connect with you, or are there others as well?
That's great. Okay. Yeah, sometimes I'm on Clubhouse, but yeah, it's just checking the feed to see where I might be.
Awesome. Well, Erica, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I love your take on things. I can tell that you have years of experience doing this, and you go deep and you give actionable advice.
And I love it.
You've been listening to The Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's online CM hiring and decision makers, please visit www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.